He stood on that stage, smiling under my spotlight, pitching my idea word for word like it was his own. I didn't breathe for a full 30 seconds. Every detail, the color scheme, the tagline, the prototype design, everything was mine. The same idea I had shared with him at 2 a.m. over greasy pizza boxes and late-night caffeine-fueled brainstorming sessions. Except now, it wasn't our dream anymore. It was his launch. His company. His applause. And all I could do was sit there in the back row, pretending to clap along with everyone else while my chest burned like acid. My name's Eli Carter. 28 years old. Software engineer, lifelong tinkerer, startup dreamer. And until 3 months ago, I thought I had found my business soulmate in Zach Reynolds, my best friend since college, the guy who used to crash on my couch during finals, who once drove 3 hours just to help me move after my breakup. Zach had the charisma I lacked. He could walk into a room full of investors and have them hanging onto his every word before he'd even opened his pitch deck. I was the builder, the one who made the magic work behind the curtain. Together, we were supposed to launch something big. That something was LinkUp, an app designed to revolutionize small business networking. A tool that would connect creators, coders, designers, and marketers within their local communities, making collaboration seamless and profitable. We had spent months perfecting it. Long nights debugging code. Sketching UI layouts on napkins. Arguing about names until we landed on LinkUp. And I'd trusted him enough to share every single file from my drive. It started unraveling slowly, too slowly for me to notice at first. Zach became distant. Texts got shorter. Calls went unanswered. He said he was just overwhelmed or working on something private. I didn't question it because that's what best friends do, right? You trust. Then came the silence. The kind that feels intentional. One night, out of curiosity, I searched his name on LinkedIn. That's when I saw it. Zach Reynolds, founder and CEO of LinkUp Technologies. My stomach dropped. I clicked the profile, thinking it had to be a mistake. But there it was, the same logo, the same slogan, the same mock UPS I had personally designed. Even the mission statement was copy-pasted from our shared Google Doc. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours, my hands shaking so hard I could barely type. I called him 5 times. No answer. The next day, I drove to his apartment. The doorman told me Zach had moved out weeks ago. He didn't just steal the idea. He erased me. 2 months later, LinkUp launched publicly. And that's what brought me to that auditorium, a crowded startup showcase in San Francisco, where Zach was pitching my creation to a panel of venture capitalists. He looked good. Too good. Wearing the suit I once helped him pick for future investor meetings. LinkUp will redefine how small businesses grow, he said with that easy smile. We're not just building an app, we're building a movement. The audience ate it up. Applause, cheers, camera flashes. And I sat there, silent, invisible, the ghost of the dream we built together. I wanted to stand up. To shout. To tell everyone that the golden boy on stage was a fraud. But I didn't. Because in that moment, I realized something. He might have stolen my idea. But he didn't steal my mind. He didn't know that I had already been working on something else, something bigger. That night, I went home to my tiny apartment, where the walls were lined with white boards covered in sketches and scribbled notes. And right in the middle, underlined 3 times in red marker, were the words: Project Horizon version 2.0. Zach thought he'd buried me by stealing my first creation. He had no idea he'd just lit the fire for the next one. And this time, I wasn't going to share anything. I closed my laptop and whispered to myself. Let him enjoy the spotlight. Because soon, I'll take the whole stage. You never notice betrayal when it starts. It doesn't crash through the door with fireworks, it slips in quietly, like a draft you don't feel until the room's already cold. Back then, Zach and I were still partners. Or at least, that's what I believed. We had this ritual 7 p.m. at the Grindhouse Cafe, same table near the window. 2 laptops, 2 coffees, 1 dream. We'd stay till closing, mapping out every detail of LinkUp. The way we'd talk, you'd think we were building the next Google. But around month 4, things started to change. It began small. Zach started taking calls outside. Long ones. When he came back, he'd say things like, "Just my cousin, you know how he never shuts up," and then laugh it off. But the tone was different, guarded, rehearsed. Then, he started showing up late to our sessions. Sometimes he'd cancel last minute with vague excuses: client meeting, networking event, family dinner. Meanwhile, I was pulling all-nighters alone, debugging code, sketching UI mockups, refining algorithms. He'd text me at 2 a.m, "You're killing it, bro. I'll make it up to you soon." I didn't realize what soon meant back then. One night, I remember it perfectly, the night the first real red flag appeared. We were working at his apartment. I'd just finished a prototype that connected local freelancers using a smart matching algorithm. I was so proud I could barely sit still. "Dude, this is it," I said, spinning my laptop toward him. "This is the breakthrough we needed. With this system, we can match professionals automatically, no manual input." Zach's eyes widened for a split second. Then his expression flickered too quickly to read before he leaned back, nodding casually. "Yeah," he said slowly. "It's good. Real good." But his enthusiasm felt muted. Like he was pretending to be impressed. Then, he reached for his phone face down beside his laptop. It lit up with a notification. "Investor meet 8 p.m, confirmed," white heavy check mark. He saw me glance at it and immediately flipped the phone over. "Just a group chat," he muttered. "Don't worry about it." I laughed it off, trying not to sound paranoid. "Investor meeting? Since when do we have investors?" He shrugged. "Oh, you know, just feeling the waters. Connections never hurt, right?" I wanted to be supportive, but something twisted in my gut. Why hadn't he told me before? Over the next few weeks, Zach's behavior grew even stranger. He started talking about his vision for the company instead of ours. Phrases like "my roadmap," "my pitch," "my launch." At first, I thought it was just nerves. We were both under pressure. Maybe he was trying to sound confident. But the way he said it, possessive, proprietary, it started to sting. Then, I found out about the bank account. I'd noticed that some of our shared project expenses, domain hosting, app server fees, were being charged to a card I didn't recognize. When I asked about it, Zach waved it off. "Just easier for tax reasons," he said. "You'll get full access once we go live." I didn't argue. I wanted to trust him. After all, this was Zach, my friend, my brother in arms. But late one night, curiosity won. I logged into our joint project portal and found something that stopped me cold. There was a second account listed under our company's name, LinkUp Technologies, LLC. The registration date? 2 weeks earlier. And the owner? Zachary Reynolds. No mention of me. Not even a co-founder field. I remember sitting there in my dark apartment, the glow of the screen reflecting off my coffee mug. My chest felt heavy, like I'd swallowed a stone. Was I overreacting? Maybe it was just a placeholder, I told myself. A formality. He'd explain everything in the morning. So I called him. "Hey, man," he answered cheerfully, like nothing was wrong. "Zach," I said carefully, "why is there an LLC filed under your name for LinkUp?" A pause. Then a light chuckle. "Oh, that. It's just paperwork, bro. You know how messy startups get. I'll fix it tomorrow. You filed it 2 weeks ago." He went quiet. long enough that I heard his breathing change. Then his voice came back calm, too calm. Eli, you're overthinking this. Trust me, it's nothing. And just like that, he ended the call. I barely slept that night. My mind replayed every late-night chat, every trust me he'd ever said. By morning, I convinced myself I was imagining things, that stress was warping my judgment. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. Zach was hiding things. And whatever it was bigger than a name on a document. The next time we met at the cafe, I watched him carefully, the way he avoided eye contact when I mentioned updates, the way he changed the subject every time I asked about the app's future. Something in his smile had changed too. It wasn't warmth anymore. It was calculation. And though I didn't have proof yet, for the first time, I felt fear. Not of losing the project, but of losing my best friend. When betrayal finally shows its face, it doesn't look like a villain, it looks like someone you used to call brother. It happened on a grey Tuesday. I remember because I was running late to work, half asleep and half caffeinated, when my phone started blowing up with notifications. Mentions. Tags. Press releases. Tech blogs. And right there, plastered across every headline, was the story that shattered everything I thought I knew. Zach Reynolds launches groundbreaking app LinkUp, revolutionizing local business networking. I froze on the sidewalk, the words burning into my brain. They'd written about the platform's mission, its algorithm, even the origin story, all stolen. Word for word. Except in Zach's version, he was the sole inventor. My heart slammed against my ribs. I clicked link after link, desperate to find any mention of my name. There was none. Not in the article. Not in the credits. Not even in the company bio. He'd erased me completely. Every diagram I'd sketched. Every late-night breakthrough. Every sleepless hour. All under his name now. And the worst part? The screenshots showed the app's interface identical to my last build. He hadn't changed a thing. I opened my laptop and checked our shared repository. The files were gone. The access permissions had been revoked. My name was no longer listed as a contributor. Just one name remained. Zachary Reynolds. I called him. No answer. Called again. Straight to voicemail. By the fifth attempt, I wasn't even speaking words anymore, just raw disbelief spilling out of me. Zach, what the hell did you do? I shouted into the empty air. You know that's my code. You know that's my work. Call me back, man. Please. Nothing. I sat there, phone trembling in my hand, feeling something inside me break. A few hours later, I got an email. From Zach Reynolds. Subject: let's not make this ugly. Eli. I know you're upset. I was going to explain everything when things settled. You weren't ready to handle investors, man. I had to make a move before someone else did. You're still my brother, but I need to steer this ship. I'll make sure you're taken care of once the funding comes through. Zach. I stared at the words, each one like a slap. Taken care of. Like I was a burden. A leftover. I'd built half that app, no, more than half. The code, the algorithm, the entire matching system. Without me, LinkUp would have been a blank screen. And he dared to say I wasn't ready? The rage came slow, then hit all at once. I slammed my fist into the desk so hard my coffee spilled, splattering across the keyboard. But I didn't care. My breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. For years, Zach had been my closest friend. We'd celebrated birthdays together, survived college together, dreamed together. And now, he'd sold our dream for applause. That night, I watched his live interview on YouTube. He stood under the bright studio lights, wearing the same confident grin he always had, that smooth voice, those easy hand gestures. I've always believed in empowering small businesses, he said. The idea for LinkUp came to me one night when I realized local entrepreneurs needed better tools to connect. The idea came to me. My blood boiled. He was taking bows for something I had poured my soul into. And worse, the crowd believed him. The comments were full of admiration, investors calling him the next Silicon Valley prodigy. The betrayal wasn't just professional. It was personal. It was surgical. He hadn't just stolen an idea. He'd stolen my identity, the creator, the dreamer, the builder behind it all. For a week, I disappeared. Ignored calls. Slept in fragments. Barely ate. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smug smile. Heard his voice saying we're brothers. And the more I replayed it, the more a dark realization grew. This wasn't an accident. This had been planned. All those late-night investor meetings. The LLC filing. The secretive phone calls. He'd been setting me up for months. And I'd walked right into it, blinded by friendship. One night, I pulled up the LinkUp website again. I scrolled through the Meet the Team section. Zock's face was there, front and center. Beside him were a few names I didn't recognize: new developers, designers, investors. People he'd hired using my foundation. At the bottom, a tagline. Built from scratch by Zach Reynolds. That was it. The breaking point. I remember whispering to the empty room, my voice shaking but cold. Fine, Zach. You built LinkUp. I leaned back in my chair, eyes narrowing. Then I'll build something that makes LinkUp look like a toy. That night, I opened a new project folder. New name. New vision. This time, I wasn't building for applause, I was building for justice. Zach had taken everything I'd built once. But he'd made one fatal mistake. He forgot that I was the architect. And an architect always keeps the blueprints. It's strange how betrayal doesn't kill you. It burns you down, and if you're lucky, you realize the ashes are just fuel. For a week after Zock's launch, I didn't leave my apartment. The blinds stayed closed, the dishes piled up, and the only light came from the dull glow of my computer screen. Everywhere I looked online, his name filled the feed. Zach Reynolds. Visionary. Innovator. Disruptor. My idea had gone viral. And I had disappeared. The anger came in waves, followed by a deeper kind of ache. The kind that doesn't scream. It just sits there, heavy, reminding you of how easily you were replaced. At first, I tried to fight it, telling myself it wasn't worth it, that revenge wouldn't change anything. But the truth? Doing nothing felt worse than losing everything. 3 days into my spiral, my sister Nora showed up. She let herself in with the spare key, wrinkling her nose at the mess. You look like you've been held hostage by caffeine and regret. I tried to joke. Failed. Guess that's one way to build character. She glanced at the stack of printed articles on my desk, all of them with Zock's name. You can't keep doing this, Eli. What do you want me to do? He stole everything. Then build something he can't steal. I looked up at her, blinking. What's that supposed to mean? She walked over, picked up one of the articles, and tore it in half. You made LinkUp because you wanted to help people connect, right? That didn't come from a company, that came from you. He can take your code, your logo, your pitch deck. But he can't take you. She dropped the torn paper onto the desk. So either you sit here watching him win, or you start building again. Then she left, no hug, no pep talk, just that. And somehow, that was enough. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing her voice in my head. Build something he can't steal. At first, it sounded impossible. Everything I'd ever created, Zach had touched. Every project, every brainstorm, every shared file, he'd been there. But then I remembered something. The original sketchbook. Before the app ever became LinkUp, I'd drafted dozens of wild concepts notes on connecting people beyond networking, something more meaningful. Back then, it felt too ambitious, too idealistic. But the idea never left me. I dug through my closet until I found it dusty, worn, edges curled. Inside were scribbles of diagrams, mind maps, unfinished algorithms. One page caught my eye. Project Horizon, connecting people by purpose, not profession. I stared at it for a long time. The handwriting was messy, the ink smudged. But the meaning was clear. Zach had stolen a product. But this was the soul behind it. And it was still mine. For the first time in weeks, something lit up inside me. I cleared my desk, wiped down the keyboard, and opened a fresh file on my computer. New project, Horizon. This time, no shared drives. No partners. Just me. I started typing fast, messy, unstoppable. Hours slipped by. Coffee cups multiplied. I lost track of time, lost track of the anger, lost track of him. What took shape wasn't another networking app. It was something more human, a system that matched creators and dreamers not by industry, but by shared goals. Not who do you work with, but what do you believe in. It wasn't just innovation. It was personal evolution. By sunrise, I sat back in my chair, exhausted but alive. For the first time since Zach's betrayal, I wasn't replaying the past, I was rewriting the future. And that's when it hit me, the moment everything clicked. Zach hadn't destroyed me. He'd defined me. Without his betrayal, I would have stayed safe, small, comfortable. I never would have dug this deep, never would have discovered what I was truly capable of. He took my first idea. But he gave me the reason to create my best one. I stepped outside for the first time in days. The city was waking up, sunlight bleeding through the fog, people rushing past with coffee cups and earbuds. For months, I'd felt invisible. Now, for the first time, I didn't need to be seen. I just needed to build. Because this time, I wasn't chasing revenge. I was chasing redemption. Zach had his spotlight, the investors, the cameras, the headlines. But I had something he never would. A purpose that couldn't be copied. That night, I wrote a message in my notebook. He stole my idea, but he can't steal my fire. I didn't know it yet, but Horizon was about to become something far greater than I'd ever imagined. And when it did, the world would remember my name. Revenge looks a lot like logistics. It's not fireworks or screaming confrontations. It's lists, timestamps, backups, and patience. After the first shock, my anger turned methodical. If Zach wanted the stage, I'd build the scaffolding underneath him and then pull it out. I mapped the plan on a whiteboard, big letters, neat columns. No theatrics. Just strategy. Step 1: gather irrefutable proof. I started with the obvious: code, commit histories, timestamps. Zach had cut me out of the repo, but developers are sloppy when they're in a rush to posture. He had left traces. I pulled backups from my local machines, recovered old branches from a corrupted drive, and stitched them to create a timeline. Every build, every variable name, every comment I'd once left in the code became evidence. I dated each file, saved hashes, notarized the key ones with a timestamp service. If you want to win in tech, you speak in SHA 256 and legalese. Step 2: document the narrative. Raw files are persuasive to engineers, but investors and the press need a story. I assembled a narrative dossier: earliest sketches from my notebook, Slack logs from college, timestamped emails where I described core functionality months before the public launch. I pulled metadata from mockups: the font choices, file names, even the untitled Photoshop layers that had my initials. Each piece of paper, each file, became a paragraph in a story that proved ownership beyond a reasonable doubt. Step 3: find witnesses. People matter. I emailed old collaborators, freelance designers, and the cafe barista who remembered us sketching on napkins. A few were reluctant. Loyalty is messy, but most remembered in small ways that fit the pattern. Eli wrote that algorithm, he was the one always debugging at 3am. I recorded conversations, all legally, where allowed, and collected affidavits from anyone willing to sign. Witnesses turned abstract proof into lived reality. This idea had always been mine. Step 4: Build a trap with incentives. You can't force a confession, but you can make cover-ups collapse. I created 2 bait strategies. First, I set up a fake investor contact, a shell email and a placeholder term sheet, and let it leak, via a private channel, to people in Zach's circle. I watched his behavior, who replied, how quickly, the exact phrasing. Second, I created a private demo that only I and a few trusted testers could access. The demo contained a hidden watermark embedded in the UI and a debug log that would surface if someone forked the code without proper auth. If he reused it, the watermark would point back to my build history. Step 5: Legal prep without waving a sword. Lawyers are expensive and loud. I didn't want to file suit right away, I wanted leverage. So I sat down with a small IP attorney on a consulting basis, enough to draft a cease and desist boilerplate and review the evidence for chain of custody issues. The attorney explained what would stand in court and what would be vulnerable. That shaped my dossier: more notarizations, clearer witnesses, clean metadata. I paid for a few DMCA takedown drafts and a non-threatening letter I could send that would unsettle investors without burning bridges. Step 6: Control the narrative launch. If Zach had headlines, I'd get them too, but on my terms. I prepared a quiet release, an under-the-radar blog post, a Medium story, a private demo day for a few reputable journalists and developer influencers. Not the full reveal, just enough to seed curiosity. The goal was twofold: to give journalists a reason to ask questions and to make investors sit up and reread their portfolios. I made sure my demo highlighted the watermark and the debug log in ways only a careful reporter would notice. I worked in the shadows for weeks. At public events, Zach still wore the crown. Investors praised his vision. The PR machine hummed. He gave keynote speeches, smiled for photos, and accepted congratulatory texts from people who had no idea he'd built anything on top of my foundation. But behind that smile, I saw cracks. In one investor Q&A, he fumbled a technical question about an algorithm I'd written, a subtle flinch, the kind only someone who'd built the thing would hide. In another interview, he used an anecdote that didn't line up with the earliest emails I had. Each inconsistency was a nail in a coffin I hadn't yet opened. Every evening I updated the whiteboard. New evidence. New witness statements. Responses from my bait. The fake investor emails had done their job. Someone from his inner circle forwarded a term sheet, asking if they should close now. That forward? It included a note that matched a draft email only found in my backup. Cross-reference that with the watermark and the debug logs, and the story tightened. Still, I didn't want to be reckless. The most dangerous moves make the other person feel completely secure. So I let him live in his illusion. I let the press adore him. I let him ride the wave while I smoothed the benches beneath him. Because the best kind of revenge is not a spectacle in a bar, it's a dismantling of the pedestal quietly, patiently, by people who actually know the truth. On the whiteboard, I wrote the final line of that week's plan: expose public, irrefutable, surgical. I didn't write how. I only knew the moment would come when everything I'd collected would snap into place and the world would have to look at the facts. Tonight, Zach would be celebrating a new partnership on stage. Tomorrow, an analyst would ask a question in a quiet voice, and that voice would echo. The smell of popcorn and praise still hung in the air around him, but I had a match and a careful, patient hand. The hunt wasn't over. It was only getting precise. And when it hit, it would be clean, no hysterics, no melodrama, just proof, delivered in a way investors, press, and engineers couldn't ignore. He still believed he was untouchable. That was the most satisfying part of all. The keynote hall smelled like ambition coffee, expensive cologne, the ozone of camera flashes. Zach stood under a halo of stage lights, palms open, telling a packed room about vision and scale as if he'd invented gravity. Investors leaned forward. Reporters typed. The applause came early, soft then swelling. I sat in the back row with a small legal team and Nora beside me. No theatrics, no banner, no selfie stick. Just a laptop, a handful of printed exhibits, and a patience honed into cold precision. For months I'd turned anger into evidence. Tonight I planned to turn evidence into a verdict. Zach began his demo, sliding through screens I had once coded by hand. The crowd oohed. Camera phones rose like a slow tide. He smiled the same smile that had once comforted me after bad dates and failed deploys. Halfway through, a moderator opened the floor for questions. A junior analyst someone Zach had used as a friendly face during previous panels raised his hand and asked an innocuous, technical question about the app's matching algorithm. Zach stammered, offering a canned answer that didn't line up with the algorithm's true mechanics. A ripple of puzzled murmurs traveled through the room. Perfect. I stood. The lights made my shadow long and lean on the aisle. Excuse me, I said. I'm Eli Carter. I'd like to demonstrate something. My voice carried without needing volume. Cameras swiveled. Zach's grin flickered. Eli, he said, the single syllable thin with a panic he tried to hide. I turned my laptop to face the room and connected to the venue's projector. On the giant screen, the whiteboard from my apartment blinked into life timestamps, SHA-256 hashes, notarized PDF stamps. I spoke calmly as I clicked through file after file, original sketches with dates, the corrupted drive recovery with commit histories, Slack logs where I'd written the exact function names weeks before his launch. Then I launched the demo I'd promised to keep private. The horizon watermark, an innocuous pattern embedded in the UI, appeared on the screen every time the algorithm executed. A small console log, visible only to developers, scrolled beneath it. The log showed a debug trace and an embedded hash that matched a file I'd notarized months earlier. I indexed it for them. That hash links to this exact build. Here's the notarization timestamp. Here's the recovered branch with my initials in the commit messages. Here's the barista who testified we were sketching this exact UI on napkins in December. Here's the developer who wired the matchmaking function. Here's a forwarded email from your team asking for clarification on implementation details sent from an address only in our backup. Silence fell heavy. Even the hum of phones lowered. Zach lunged for the mic. That's impossible, those hashes can be forged. Those logs could be. Check the metadata, I said. The EXIF and the file system timestamps were notarized using an independent timestamping authority 2 months before your LLC was registered. The debug trace also contains a private test token that only existed on my local machine. You can't fake a token tied to a machine's MAC address without physical access. I watched his face drain slowly, like color being leached from a painting. Someone in the front row, a reporter, leaned over to a VC and whispered. The VC's face turned from interest to alarm. Phones started ringing, messages popped up on screens. I didn't rush. Evidence works like a metronome, it kills with steadiness, not hysteria. Zach snapped. You're lying. Those are planted. Nora stood then, calm as a courtroom judge. You told me once, Eli, that you'd never lose your temper, she said, voice steady. He stole your work. You didn't plant anything. She handed a manila folder to a journalist at the edge of the stage. Affidavits we'd gathered, signed by the barista, the freelancer, and 2 ex-collaborators. A hush. Questions spilled like breaking glass. The moderator, a seasoned journalist, asked for Zach's response. He fumbled for words, for denials, for anything definitive, then failed. His practiced narratives didn't map to this technical, legal tightness. Investors leaned back, recalculating risk in real time. One of the lead VCS who'd publicly praised Zach just weeks earlier stood up, throat tight. "If these are substantiated," she said bluntly, "this is fraud." That word landed like thunder. Within an hour, the PR machine that had polished Zach's image started fraying. A technology outlet that had been lined up to run his big feature pulled the story for independent verification. Legal counsel who had been advising him stopped returning calls. An investor at the dinner across the street texted their colleagues, "Hold off on wires." A board member called for an emergency meeting. Zach's face crumpled as the room closed in. He tried to charm, to accuse, to apologize. Any script would have worked once, but now the room's attention had shifted from the man to the trail of evidence he couldn't erase. Cameras circled like sharks. He tried to bolt from the stage. Security intervened, gently but firmly. Reporters shouted for comment. Someone filmed him as he walked out, head bowed. The clip would loop online in minutes. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I felt something complicated, vindication edged with a slow, mournful sorrow. The man who'd been my brother was unraveling before hundreds of people who had once believed him. Outside, as sirens I couldn't yet hear began to thread through the city, I watched him pass beneath the marquee lights. No applause, just flashbulbs and a murmur that would become headlines. Investors pulled a funding pledge that night. A platform host disabled LinkUp's demo pending an IP review. People who'd once toasted Zach now whispered about ethics and ownership. On the way home, Nora squeezed my hand. "You could have taken him apart," she said, proud and tired. "I just wanted the truth to be louder than his lies," I answered. That night, footage from the keynote went viral, less for the spectacle, more for the inevitability of the collapse. In comment threads and editorials, a new phrase began to appear: credit where credit is due. Zach would later try to rebuild, to explain, to sue, to apologize. The legal battles would splay out like courtroom scenes in movies. But none of that raw drama could undo the simple fact displayed on a projector in front of witnesses: the scaffolding he'd stood on had belonged to me. As I closed my laptop, a message from an anonymous developer popped up on my screen: "Saw your demo. We're in. When do we start?" I smiled, feeling the first warm tendril of the future curl up through the cold. Tonight had been the breaking. Tomorrow horizon began. The story didn't end with the press conference, it only echoed from there. Within 48 hours, Zach's company, LinkUp, lost every major investor. The funding round collapsed like a sandcastle under a wave. The same news outlets that had once crowned him the next visionary now tore through his history with forensic precision. Screenshots, testimonies, court filings, they told the story I had lived through, only now it was narrated by the world. Zach tried to play the victim. He released a shaky apology video, claiming we had collaborated and that I'd misunderstood. But every word only made the hole deeper. People compared timestamps, legal filings, and Git logs I'd made public. He wasn't facing just my wrath anymore, he was facing the digital jury of a world that hates plagiarism more than failure. And then came the lawsuit. I didn't want revenge by blood, I wanted justice by truth. The evidence was airtight. Nora and I had compiled everything with a precision that made the courtroom feel less like a battle and more like math. Every exhibit, every testimony, every line of code built a ladder toward the inevitable. Zach's lawyer tried to argue joint development, but the notarized proof file hashes, domain registrations, timestamped prototypes all bore my name. The judge's ruling came down like steel: intellectual property theft, breach of trust, and fraudulent representation. He lost everything: his company, his reputation, even his own name. LinkUp's assets were liquidated and, by order of the court, awarded to me. But I didn't revive LinkUp. I buried it. Instead, I built something cleaner, something honest. Horizon, the project that had begun on napkins and sleepless nights, was reborn. Only this time, it wasn't about revenge or validation. It was about vision, built from integrity instead of ego. We launched quietly at first. No fireworks, no staged interviews, just a product that worked and a team that believed. Within 6 months, we'd hit 1 million users. Within a year, major investors, real ones, came knocking. And the best part? They came for the idea, not the illusion. Meanwhile, Zach vanished from the tech world. His name became a cautionary tale whispered in startup circles: don't pull a Zach. I heard he took a corporate job under a fake surname, somewhere small, away from the glare he once craved. One night, a full year after the trial, I saw him again, pure accident. I was on stage at a tech conference in San Francisco, giving a keynote about innovation ethics. When I walked off stage, the applause still buzzing in my ears, I caught sight of him at the back of the room. Older. Thinner. Dressed in a cheap suit that hung on him like guilt. Our eyes met for a heartbeat. He tried to smile, but the weight of everything he'd lost pressed down on that half-smile until it collapsed. He mouthed something, maybe sorry. Maybe why. But I didn't stop walking. Because sometimes forgiveness isn't a word, it's distance. That night, after the event, I sat alone in my office overlooking the city lights. Nora came in, set down 2 cups of coffee, and looked at me with that mix of pride and disbelief that still caught me off guard. You did it, she said softly. You built what he couldn't. I smiled. He built with greed. I built with purpose. That's the difference. Horizon had become more than a company. It was a reminder that truth may take longer to build, but when it stands, it doesn't fall. I opened my inbox later that night, hundreds of emails from developers, dreamers, students. People who'd lost their work, their credit, their trust. People who wanted to know how I came back from betrayal. And that's why I tell this story, not as a warning, but as proof. If someone ever steals your idea, your credit, your spark, don't waste your energy trying to break them. Build something bigger. Build so beautifully that the universe itself becomes your witness. Because the sweetest revenge isn't destruction. It's creation. Clapperboard to everyone watching: have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? A friend, a coworker, a partner who took what was yours and claimed it as their own? Tell me your story in the comments, I read every one. Speech balloon. And if you believe in poetic justice, if you believe in turning betrayal into brilliance, make sure to hit subscribe, because more stories like this are coming. High voltage sign: he stole my idea, but I built something he could never copy myself.